Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Kerry Pieri, who is a debut author, and her first book is a children's book, and I'm going to let Kerry talk to you about it. Kerry, why don't you say a little bit about your little Zodiac book?
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So here is my first book. Maybe it'll be my only book. Who knows? Maybe there'll be 10 more.
Let's
Um,
hope not.
but I was so excited to do this book. I had my daughter 5 years ago, and I wanted to find a children's Zodiac book when I had her. And when I looked around, there were like a few from maybe the 70s that you could get off eBay, but there wasn't anything really current. So I thought that I would write one for her. I've always loved astrology. I think it's just, the coolest way of looking at the universe. And, maybe we're getting a little bit of help from somewhere is kind of like a nice feeling. So I really wanted to write it. To represent each sign in a really positive way. There's nothing in here about like Tauruses being too stubborn. It's really about something that makes each sign special. And I think it's a really beautiful entryway into talking about different personality traits and different planets, and even getting into like the elements of water and air and earth. And things like that to kind of, ground you during the day, or recognize that maybe you like need water, maybe it's time for a bath or to go for a swim, or maybe you need air and to get out for a walk and run around. So I just feel like there's so many different beautiful ways to talk about astrology, and this is, a great entryway to do that.
Could you give us a little example of one?
Sure, sure. Well, I'll read my sign. Oh, and I opened
Okay.
it. So I'm a Virgo. Um, and I'll hold it this way so you can see it. So it says Virgo, and then the date's August 23rd to September 22nd. The element is earth, and the symbol is maiden for Virgo. Little Virgo, you like things just so. You plant beautiful flowers just to watch them grow. You'll spend whole days with stacks of books, or take long walks through sunlit woods. Smart and charming, the world is yours, so peer through every window and open each door.
Very nice.
Little poems for each sign. And when I read it to my daughter Lila, we like to go through and say like, oh, this is grandma's sign, this is Aunt Katie's sign. And it's just like a fun way also of learning people's birthdays and the different months of the year. I'm a big Elsa Beskow fan. And I love her book about taking you through the months. So that was partly the inspiration as well.
Oh, okay. That was my next question. What was the inspiration for your book?
Yeah, so when it comes to different writers, Elsa Beskow is a really big one. We just like fell in love with her. I'd never heard of her before I had kids. And I just like love the poems that she writes. Even though they're translated, I think that they still come across really beautifully. And I thought the illustrations in all of her books are so gorgeous. And I also just love the idea that you can find this author from Sweden from, I don't, is it 100 years ago maybe, and have it still resonate. So I think that that's what's so beautiful about well-told stories is that they're timeless. So I really loved that about it too. So part of what she does is, like I said, like taking you through the months of the year. And I think so much of how we, speak to children should be about that. Taking time and paying attention to how the rhythms of the day go and how the rhythms of the months go. And I love that she invites that in. And I, tried to use this book somewhat to do that as well. And really it's about, slowing down and how each sign has different things that spark joy for them, whether it's like baking bread if you're a Taurus, or, traveling or whatever it is. So that was really, she was a big influence, I would say.
And there's a lot of nature also in there, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, what were the steps that you took to bring it from a from your inspiration to a final product?
Yes, that I mean, I actually worked in publishing, but on the journalism fashion magazine end. So I naively thought it would be a little easier than it actually was. I was like, oh,
Aha.
I know people. So I basically wrote it. That's what I did. And then I did some illustrations myself just to have something to show. I ended up using a beautiful illustrator, Maria Mola, who illustrated the book. Because I do think a real, I give credit where credit is due. Illustrators are a wonderful part of the process. So I wrote the book, I wrote a first draft, and I took it around to some people. And, I had some heartening calls and things like that, but to get an agent took longer than I thought it might. But eventually, this is sort of interesting. And I think for other people looking to publish, to really do your work to see who are the agents behind the kind of books that align with yours. So once I started looking into more sort of spiritually minded or even, sort of like those Hay House type books is where I kind of ended up going. And I found my book agent, Anne Marie O'Farrell, through that, and she was
Mhm.
so wonderful. And so even though I'd rewritten the book a few times, once I spoke with her, we made a few changes together, and finding her probably took a year or so, year and a half maybe. And then she found source books to publish it within 2 weeks. So the process of
Wow.
finding my agent was really long, but finding somebody to publish it took almost no time.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah, so super exciting. And then Sourcebooks found Maria Mola with me, and I did a bunch of like mood boards, I call them, where I put together like different images and drawings to kind of like influence what the final drawings would look like. And Maria just ran with those and did such a gorgeous job. And then it was still another year and a half once, I got signed to getting the book on shelves. So it is, when you work on the internet like I did for so long, it is such a long process comparatively. But I think it's also good to slow down sometimes. So and I learned a lot along the way, and everyone was so wonderful and supportive. And Sourcebooks is such a beautiful publishing company. I feel so blessed that they're who I ended up with. So yeah, that's how I did it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Excuse me. And how much research did you have to do for your book?
Oh, I did a ton. I've obviously always really loved astrology. And I've had my chart done by many astrologers, but I actually took a course on Intro to Astrology to read charts and to really delve into the different signs, and really get like a super clear picture of what each one represented. Kind of away from the more, I guess, like cliche ideas of each sign. I really wanted to delve into like the nuances of them. So, there were definitely a lot of books that I referenced, and just like, there's amazing Instagram accounts that go into different signs and really like delve into each particular sign. So I would say, that took probably a few months of really like making sure that once I had the poem ready, it really represented each sign how I wanted it to.
What made you decide to use poetry?
I've always loved poetry. It's just like one of those things that since I was a little girl, I would write poems. I would write poems for my mom. I would, somehow end up like reading a poem in front of class or at church. And I just was always gravitated towards it. I studied it somewhat in college. And I just love it. And I love the lyrical aspect. And like I said, Elsa Bethgow was a big influence. I love how she writes. And Emily Winfield Martin as well is another author that I really love, and she does a lot of like rhyming in her poems. And I think that when you're reading things like this, like more like shorter, it is nice to have like something lyrical to go with it. So I really wanted to lean into that.
Okay. Did Going back to the research, did you have a favorite research story?
I mean, doing the class, I actually have an astrologer, Rebecca Gordon, and she has like taught me so much about astrology. And I'd thought about taking the Intro to Astrology class for such a long time, but actually delving into it and really getting into how astrologers read charts and how they really delve into each sign and how different planets affect everything. I just found it all so, it made me respect astrologers more than I already did because it's such a science. It's an art and a science, I would say, coming together. And then I also really loved the aspect of, and I hope it comes across in the book because it's not necessarily something like spoken so directly, but like I mentioned of the elements, with like air, earth, water, and fire. I love the idea of using those throughout the day and so that you balance out your day and especially with your children. So making sure that there's aspects with water when you take a bath, air to be like outside and running around, fire to like maybe light candles at the dinner table, or in the winter, like sit down by a fireplace and like read and be cozy. So really like finding all of those, or earth to like really get out in the mud and like ground your feet and do all of those things. So I liked the idea of inviting in like that sort of rhythm. And I hope it comes across.
Yeah, it does actually.
Thank
So,
you.
what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out the Zodiac, Baby Zodiac book?
I would say finding the agent.
Okay.
That was definitely the hardest. And then sort of along the way, as I spoke with other agents who I didn't end up signing with, obviously, they would make changes and things like that I wanted to get this book out into the world. It was important to me, but it is that balance of like making sure you maintain your voice and what you really wanted to do with it. Um, so that was something that sometimes I would make changes to that they asked for to like pitch to them, and then once it didn't work out or whatever, when I would go back to start again, I would realize like those changes didn't necessarily represent what I wanted to ultimately do with the book. The other aspect was finding Maria, the illustrator, and it was, I have a fashion background. I care very much about what things look like. I have 4 signs in Libra. So I really, really wanted it to be, have like a certain look and aesthetic. And I'm so happy that we found her because she's just exactly what we wanted. She does such gorgeous drawings throughout. They're just whimsical, but still really beautiful. And that was a process. We definitely had maybe 4 or 5 people send in examples and take a try at it. And yeah, Maria was the one for sure.
So, how did you find her?
It was actually source books that found her. I had found a
Ah,
good couple of people, just through like researching that I thought could be great, and ultimately illustrating children, I think, is really its own thing. So Maria has a lot of prior work in that realm, and so she really was the best fit. And other talented people, but for some reason it didn't translate into a children's look.
hmm okay. So, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
That's a good question. So the book has been out, I guess, almost 2 months, and I'm hoping to do a few more readings. I've done a couple, just in New York State. So I would love to kind of get out a little bit more and do readings with people. And it's been so wonderful to get the feedback of, people just DMing me pictures of their babies with the book, or people, telling me that seeing me do this really inspired them to really try to write the children's book that they've always wanted to do. So really like the energy around this has been so wonderful, and I just really want to keep it going. And the more people that can have this book and have it in their lives and read it to their children at night, I just feel like it's such a beautiful thing to have out in the world. And when I have another book idea, I will let you know.
That's great. Wonderful. Okay, now I have some questions about you as a writer, on
Okay.
being a writer. What's your favorite part about being a writer, on the whole writing and publishing process?
I would say like really the process of writing is my favorite part. I think that and every writer I think knows that time when you lose time, when you're really in the moment, it seems to be like flowing from somewhere else, and it's just really working and what you wanted it to be in your head is what ends up on the page, and it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have to walk away from it, but when you're really in that flow and it's like coming out of you, that's I think the best part.
Okay. And what do you consider the most challenging part of being a writer?
Um, I would say if you're a writer who wants to be published, that process is not easy. Sometimes it might be easy for people. I don't want to say it's always not easy. But I think, that's a process. You have to be committed to it. And I think like anything in life, you have to be willing to fail a few times before you don't.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Okay. Um, and what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
My favorite adventure. I mean, this has been such an adventure. Just getting, my prior work in writing had been more fashion journalism, but all digital. So everything that I have written, for the most part, with like a few exceptions, exist on the internet. So what that means is like they all may just disappear one day. And so to have something that I can like hold in my hand and dedicate to my daughter in the back, and just really have something that like has my name and can live on. That is like so exciting to me as a writer. I think the internet's a great and wonderful place sometimes. I'm always happy to be a part of it, but it is also so transient. And so to have something a little bit more concrete is amazing.
Hmm. I always like to have something solid
Yeah,
in my hands rather than on a
totally.
screen.
It does.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Mhm.
So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned in your writing career?
I think I think that the lesson is to stay true to yourself. I think that if you have a vision, obviously there's so many people with great ideas and you can absolutely listen to them, but to really stay true to what your intent is, and to kind of like stay along with that. Yeah, and to just believe in yourself, and revise and revise and revise.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
And so, what piece of advice is that is that the main piece of advice that you would want to share with other writers, or do you have something else?
I think the main advice is to write. I think if this book hadn't gotten published, I would have read it to Lila, my daughter. It would have existed in the world and I would have been proud of it. So I think that the idea is to like get your ideas on paper and really put it out there, because you don't really know what'll happen with it. Maybe it'll end up being an Instagram account. Maybe it'll end up being a book. Maybe you'll start a newsletter. Like there, I think, are so many places to get your voice out into the world, and just get it on paper.
Okay, I agree. Now, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend to other writers that might have helped you in your career?
I wish I knew more. I will be listening to other people who have that advice. I don't.
Okay.
I would like to get more in community with other writers. That would be a next step I would love to take.
Okay. I know that there are several recommendations that other authors who I've spoken to have mentioned a few
Great.
uh,
Yeah, I'll research more of that.
places. Yeah, there's some great organizations out there. All right, now I have questions about you as a person.
Okay.
What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Let's see, something that most people don't realize. So I left New York City about 3 years ago to come back to my hometown of Buffalo, New York. And I don't think that most people know that I left New York City.
I guess if you were in the fashion industry, yeah. Wow. And you're in Buffalo, New York with all the snow.
Yeah, it's all the snow. There's been a lot.
I would imagine this year I've heard about that. Okay. What is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time for your non-writing hobbies and things that you love?
Yeah, so I'm also a painter. I love to paint. I do oil abstract paintings. So that's something that I love to do. And I think it uses such a different part of your brain than writing. So I do love to do both because writing, I think, is so cerebral, whereas painting, it's almost more about like losing your mind, for lack of losing that part of your brain that's really switched on. So that's something that I really love to do. So yeah, I would say writing and painting and interior design. I love shopping for vintage furniture and home accessories, and that's been something that's fun and expensive.
Yes, I would think so. Okay. And next question, what does your writing space look like?
Oh, I wish I was more organized about this. I do have a desk set up, but I don't always sit at it. I when I was writing this book, I what most of it, I was still in New York. So, sometimes I would get an idea while I was on the subway and I would write down a couple of lines. Sometimes I would write, on my couch. So I'm definitely somebody I can write anywhere.
You can write anywhere. Now, when you're writing, would you prefer silence or music? And if it's music, what type of music?
Yeah, if music is on, I can't have like words in it. I do like classical music a lot. I will put on classical music sometimes to write as sort of like a background vibe. I do like to like set a mood. I like there to be like, pretty light coming in and music on. Like that's also really great. But I grew up in a family of six, so in a house, I shared a bedroom with my sisters, so I can work in like chaos too, and it doesn't bother me. Like I've never had a problem like writing an open office floor plan, so I don't necessarily need that Virginia Woolf setup in order to get it done.
Okay. And when you're writing or editing, is there any food or drink that you'd like to have with you?
I do love a coffee. I love a cappuccino, and I also am a big fan of matcha lattes. That's
Ah,
a newer one.
okay. And writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions with them to either help or hinder them with their work. And do you have any, or do they help or hinder you?
I do not. I do not have any pets. I do love animals, but I don't own any at the moment. But I do have a 5-year-old daughter, and she does not always respect the process. She does
Uh-huh.
not. She'll just come sit on my lap while I'm writing, but that's okay too, because a lot of it's for her anyway.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, they kind of do the same thing as some pets do
Yeah,
sometimes. I
they do.
agree with that. Okay. Um, my last two questions that I have for you. One is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I always give a plug for Annie's, and you can you can get excuse me, you can get Carrie's book at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your book?
Well, I'm on Instagram where I like to talk about astrology and things like that, at Kerry Pieri. And I also have a website where I keep my writing and things like that up to date, and that is kerrypieri.me.
Ah, okay. That's actually where we can follow your work and share your awesomeness. But where can people find your books? Is that where we can
Oh,
find
my
your
book
books?
is, yeah, well, I do. I have it on my website, and then it's also on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and mostly where books are sold, thankfully.
Okay. So those are the two questions that I have.
Amazing.
Okay, great. Well, that's all I have for you, Carrie.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It was nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too. Thank you for joining me today. And
Happy to.
good luck with your book, and hopefully you'll be writing another one.
Thank you. And I'll come back and talk about it with you.
Definitely. Okay, thanks very much. Bye.